Hey, how are you? Happy Friday. I am Chris. That is Keith. We are with Fantasy Six Pack to talk about the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, Keith. And like I said, bottom of the barrel was published maybe a few hours ago. It's pinched me because the Lions are still in it. And in a way,
Hello.
you got Bill Belichick coming for a second and third interviews. People are seeing him at Chick-fil-A all over Atlanta. I mean, that's got to be exciting in a way. If your team's not in it, you're going to get one of, if not the best coaches in the history of coaches, let alone football. How are we doing on Friday night, my friend?
It's not exciting in a way. I am losing my mind because we're the Falcons. We're gonna screw things up. That's what we do. But Bill freaking Belichick might be the next coach of our team. So I am just so excited. I just hope it's not a giant tease. I am worried. We did blow a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl, so don't ever count my chickens before they hatch. But I can't wait. I'm excited to talk this slate with you. And just trying to not think about the fact that we only got 3 weekends left of NFL football, which that is depressing.
I know. First off, I would never, if the Lions lost in a Super Bowl, that's one thing, but to lose the way they did, that was a few years ago, and people are just, you can never let sleeping dogs lie, is the saying, if I'm not mistaken. When we
Exactly.
look at what we have going on this weekend, it's just, again, nothing but beautiful game after beautiful game. There's a few David versus Goliath, right? And when you look at the first game of, Houston is at Baltimore, that's a David and Goliath. Green Bay at San Francisco, that's another David and Goliath in a way. And then you get Tampa Bay and Detroit, two teams that are pretty even as it stands right now, right? The regular season records don't matter. The Lions had 12. I think Tampa Bay had 8 or 9. They just got in, but it doesn't matter how you got to the dance. You're there, so you dance, right? And then you get Kansas City, Buffalo, part. To be fair, in a way, you get Houston and Buffalo. Everybody I don't think it's going to be a blowout. And then what I say, Green Bay at San Francisco. So 2 games on Saturday that could be blowouts. The NFL, in a way, they saved the best for Sunday. If color me, maybe a little bit, because the Lions are playing. But in a way, Tampa Bay, Detroit, Kansas City, Buffalo look to be 2 of the more competitive games from the 4 games that are left. But the NFL, they do what they do. Keith, let's get right into it. Let's, instead of going game from game, let's just talk about positions, if you want to. I mean, you sent me a text that says I have X amount of quarterbacks. We'll run through it that way. And true to form, I have some predictive, some projections from some final scores. I was pretty close last week. I got the Pittsburgh game right on the money. That was cool. And we'll go from there. I got player projections. You have the guys you're into, and let's roll, Keith. Where are you looking at quarterback for this weekend?
Again, I'm looking at cash games, and just so you know, I'm really a DraftKings guy. I've tried FanDuel. I'm not good at it. We're in this to win money, so definitely use my plays more on DK than FanDuel.
And perfect. I'm GPPs and I'm on FanDuel, so it's just a perfect pairing here.
What a time to be alive. I can't believe I'm saying this because without a doubt to me, Baker Mayfield is the best play this week at QB on DraftKings. I mean, for starters, he is the cheapest quarterback in this slate, at least starting one. Earmuffs, Chris. The Detroit Lions are not a very good secondary. Like, they struggle with the pass. Incredible run defense, but they do not handle the pass very well. Last week, the reason they won that game, and that's going to be the recipe, I believe, again this week, is they got to stand up in the red zone because teams are going to move the ball on them. We've seen that consistently. If they can do like they did last week against the Rams, I think they're going to, again, win this week, but they've got to stop them in the red zone. But I'm very confident that Baker is going to have a lot of passing yards and throw some touchdowns. Since week 9, the Lions by 8 of 10 QBs facing them have scored 23.5 points or more. QBs in that 10-game stretch are averaging almost 24 points per game. Some of the QBs they played in that stretch, Nick Mullins twice, Carr, Russell Bustle Wilson. So it's not all these, elite QBs. And then Baker's playing really well. Last week, I'm mad at myself for not playing him because, A, the Eagles' defense is just atrocious. But also, I overlooked at the way he seemed injured coming out of the Carolina game. I felt like he was not throwing the ball very well. It was some lower leg stuff. His ankle was apparently messed up. And then he went out and really was throwing the ball as well as I've seen him since like his early days in Cleveland. It was really impressive. He's had 300 plus yards in 3 of 5, 19 points or more on DK in 9 of 12, 19.8 points on DK in 5 of his last 6, 13 touchdowns in his last 6. And again, that includes the 0 touchdown performance against Carolina. So, I mean, really, that's 13 touchdowns basically in 5 games. So I'm starting with him. You got to obviously pair him with Mike Evans, which we'll get into more with the wide receivers, but I like the value of that. The other guy for me really is Josh Allen at 8K. I understand the concern of the price tag and everything. He's the most expensive QB on the slate, one of like the top 3-4 expensive guys, period, at any position. But, I mean, Josh Allen, we need to talk about his playoff resume. It's pretty freaking impressive. In 2021, he had back-to-back 300-yard games in his first 2, over 60 rushing yards in both, 5 touchdowns in the first game, 4 in the second. In fact, he's had multiple touchdowns in 4 or 5 playoff games. He's had 4 or more touchdowns in 3 of 5. And then what I really love is he is starting to run. If you look in this 3-game slate here recently, almost 200 yards rushing. It's by far the most rushing yards Josh Allen's had all season in a 3-game stretch. And then, oh, hey, by the way, the Kansas City Chiefs, they are 25th this year in rushing yards allowed to QBs. It's a little bit over 20 yards per game, which I know that doesn't seem much, but if you look at any of these numbers across the board, it's not that high. It's like number 1 wide receivers averaging like 80 yards per game would be in the top 5 or 10 in the league. And then finally, what I love about Allen, if like me, you think that, because I do, I think this is going to be his statement game, his like, I'm here, I'm going to finally get over the hurdle that is the Kansas City Chiefs. They've been waiting 3 years to get this game at home. And if you believe that like I do, I love the fact you can pair him with Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid, and it's not that expensive. It kind of negates his price tag of 8K because you basically get his second and third weapon, for under 5K on DraftKings. I'll get into more why. I also love those guys when we get the receivers, tight ends. The only other person I want to mention, because my boy Joe the Brain Matt, so I do shows with every Thursday right here on Fantasy Six Pack, he really convinced me that we should be looking at Brock Purdy. This Green Bay Packers defense is by far the worst defense left remaining. If you look at DVOA, adjusted for who they play, they are 27th of 32 teams. The next worst defense of the remaining playoff teams is the Houston Texans, who are 17th. So there's a good chance that he's going to ball. I'm worried about the big CMC game, and that's why ultimately I don't really have him in the same class as Allen and Baker, who are going to be basically the 2 guys I'm going to have in the most of my cash lineups. But he made a very good case, and especially Shanahan having that extra week. We know that he knows all about LaFleur and the Packers, and I think the San Francisco 49ers and the Baltimore Ravens are really good football teams, and we're going to be reminded of it this week, despite them playing 2, really cool underdog stories. I think it's kind of going to end for him. So I do want to mention Brock Purdy, but for me, really, it's Baker or Allen, and it just all depends on, do you want to save money at QB or do you want to spend? But I do think if you play Allen, you got to go all in and play Shakir and Kincaid with him.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. Like I can't, there's what is there 4 games, so there's 8 quarterbacks, so it's really slim pickings if you're gonna write an article like bottom of the barrel.
Right.
You're gonna leave some guys out like Allen and Patrick Mahomes, and rightfully so. But I will say this: Baker Mayfield is mentioned in bottom of the barrel. It's kind of a no-brainer move. If there's 8 quarterbacks on the slate, and just cut them in half: Golf, Love, Mayfield, and Stroud. Those are the 4 cheapest, and you get the 4 higher tier guys: Mahomes, Allen, and Purdy, as you mentioned. But when we look at Baker Mayfield, I get it. I understand it. But is that? I'm going to ask you a question. Is this the biggest football game, professional football game of Baker Mayfield's life? Can we agree that's it? Has he's played in a wild
maybe
card
the
game?
Kansas City, he had a divisional game versus KC a few years ago. He actually played really well and they had a chance to win. But it's definitely either that game or this one. And with this being obviously his first chance to actually get to a conference championship game, I would say, yeah, this is probably higher now.
Yeah, and he's older. We're all older and beat up here, but I'm not saying I last week I didn't give a prediction, a score, but I can give you my opinion on what I think is going to happen. And again, this game is going to be very close in my estimate. And for some odd reason, maybe it makes I feel better about it, but I do truly believe this. Baker Mayfield is a great dude. I've always loved watching him play and what he says and what he does. And it's fun watching everybody else catch up to what and who Baker Mayfield really is. People have put him down for years. He's a piece of shit.
He got screwed in Cleveland. I mean, it was a shitty situation, and they just cut bait when it's like, you think that team wouldn't have been as good this year with Baker Mayfield instead of Deshaun Watson or even Joe Flacco?
Exactly. It was a crappy situation, but I think Baker's going to turn kind of back into a pumpkin here. I'm not saying that he's going to go out there and just completely no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. They're going to have to pull him for being so bad. That would be like a HBO movie, right? If he goes out there and it's just his first 3 passes are interceptions, 2 for touchdowns. That would be great as a Lions guy. But Baker Mayfield, we all know what he's got. Anybody that's watching, I'm not going to go over their roster here, but when you have the other team who just lost in Detroit, call or text Baker. I'm sure everybody's friends with everybody in that kind of situation and say that's the loudest situation we've ever been in. And Baker plays that cool, hip guy. And I truly do enjoy watching Baker play. But for some odd reason, I feel like it's, I took my earbuds out and I really didn't hear you when I put them in at the right time. I don't know what you said, but I think this run comes to an end for Tampa Bay. And we talk about, the likings of Houston and Green Bay. Both of those teams that they're playing with house's money right now. They're not weren't even expected. Green Bay wasn't probably even expected to make the playoffs. We know Houston wasn't expected to make the playoffs, and here they are in the divisional round, 1 win away from the championship Sunday. So when I look at this slate here, it's Jared Goff, and I have Baker Mayfield highlighted too, but you laid it out completely beautiful. So I'll talk about Goff and Jordan Love briefly with a little bit of CJ Stroud, and we'll keep it moving. About 12 minutes in, it's Friday night. We're live. We're talking about the divisional round of the playoffs, DFS, sports betting, whatever, here at Fantasy Six Pack. Jared Goff, the whole stadium. Granted, people were showing videos of the Lions fans. They filled the stadium 2 hours early and they were chanting his name during warmups. Well, it's still so cold in Detroit that the manager, it's a female of Ford Field, opened the doors way early, 2 or 3 hours early, so fans could come in and get warm. They put on the Green Bay game in Dallas. That was fantastic. But and everybody was so excited to begin with, and the cold and it just pushed everybody into Ford Field early, and they were chanting Goff's name from start to finish. And then if you watched any of the postseason stuff in the locker room, Goff and Dan Campbell walked in, they were talking to media, and everybody was in the locker room. Even everybody, his teammates and the uniform people, and they were chanting Goff's name when he walked into the locker room. That, you can't put a price tag on, when you say Goff is 7-6 on FanDuel, 6-3 on DK, Baker 7-3, and on DraftKings C6K. You can't put a price tag on a magical run or a city that's revitalized because of a team or a situation there. But this game is in Detroit. If it was in Tampa Bay, I'd be singing a different tune. Just so happens I'm a Lions fan. I don't let that sway my decisions. But Jared Goff and Baker Mayfield, one's going to be a pumpkin. The other one's going to go on to the championship Sunday. When we look at Goff, 23-24 completions, 265 to 270 yards. I think Goff and Baker are each good for 2 touchdown passes. It's going to be that third one, which will ultimately decide the game, might decide that, are you in the cash or are you not? I'm just going to go with Jared Goff because I believe in his talent, and it's a home game for the Lions. Again, different story if it was in Tampa, but it's not. Can you believe, let's say Green Bay wins? That would be strange. That would be sweet, actually.
I would not believe that, but it would be cool.
And Tampa Bay wins, the NFC Championship game would be in Tampa Bay. It's just that's what the NFL wants, though. They don't want these dynasties, and that's why they do salary caps. They want all this, parity and everything. A new team every year can get it done. And lastly, Jordan Love. Just because, again, I said the same thing last week when Jordan Love. I didn't expect Dallas to just shit like they did. I didn't expect Green Bay to win. I surely didn't expect Green Bay to put up all those points, but in a way,
they curb stomped them.
I'm expecting the same thing here with Jordan Love. If San Francisco and CMC and, Debo and Ayuk and Kittle, they're going to do their thing. This is the same thing I said last week. And I come to you humbly to say, I apologize for that, but hey, it's betting. Anything can happen. Jordan Love and the Packers are going to be behind. I like Jordan Love to just throw. Mix in Aaron Jones, who I mentioned on the broadcast last week. He scored 3 times.
That was
crazy. It was a beautiful, but again, Aaron Jones out of the realm of possibility and bottom of the barrel because of his price tag. But again, he's always been a star-stud talent, and he's fresh and he's healthy, and we're in the playoffs. It's a beautiful thing. So give me Jared Goff, Jordan Love, and a little bit of CJ Stroud. Baltimore, everybody's saying Baltimore's winning by 17 points, by 13 points. No matter what way you slice it, I'm taking the Houston Texans and the points. They're not going to win, but they can still cover.
Right.
There's a difference there. People think, well, if you're taking the novice bettors, right? I can take Houston +9. It doesn't mean I expect them to win the game. Those are 9.5 fake points.
We love backdoor covers, don't we?
That we sprinkle into the universe. So CJ Stroud, I have Goff, Love, Mayfield, Stroud, all 4 of them with at least 2 touchdown passes, all 4 of them at least 250 passing yards. I'll put it like that, and we can move on. When we look at the running backs position here this week, there's a lot to like. And just looking at my bottom of the barrel notes, I'll take a picture when we're done here and share them this evening instead of after the Saturday games have already kicked off. Doesn't do anybody any good. I like the combination of the Baltimore Ravens running backs, just a little taster. But Keith, where are you sitting this weekend? And I'm expecting you to use Dave Eddy's spiel here when it comes to Christian McCaffrey.
Absolutely. I have learned a lot. Yeah, I've learned a lot from Dave Eddy this year, and definitely death taxes and CMC. I know it's a hard pill to swallow. I get
in cash. You got to say in cash.
Yeah, in cash. I'm sorry, in cash games. It's 8,800. It's a hard pill to swallow on DK. He is $600 more than anybody else on DraftKings. He's like $2,000 more than every other running back. But this is CMC. And again, this Packers defense, don't be fooled. I mean, one of the issues I think last week with Dallas's offense is we saw how much they struggled down. I mean, really almost the entire season running the ball consistently. We all had Tony Pollard being this breakout guy, and it just didn't happen. CMC is going to break out. What I love the most is he's so well rested. We know he got banged up in the second to last game. So he's basically now not played for 2.5 weeks. And the last 2 games with the Niners, when he's had a bye or a week off, 48 touches, 313 total yards, 5 touchdowns. Now, granted, 4 of those came against Arizona, but he did have 150 yards and a touchdown in the other game as well. And I mean, he's just so automatic. 20+ points on DK in 8 of his last 10. One of those games, by the way, he scored 19.3 points. So basically 19.3 points or more in 9 of his last 10. And the game that he did was the Washington game that he got hurt in. And I think the Niners know they don't want to get in just a straight up and down shootout with Green Bay, because to me, that's what's scary. And the one thing that the 49ers have to worry about, like the Cowboys, they have not been a great team when they trail. They've been very good when the game is close or they have the lead, but over the last 2 years, if they get down, we think of the Philly conference title game last year. I know Purdy was hurt, but think of the Ravens games this year. The Bengals game. Like, if you can get up on them, it puts them where they can't do what they want to do, which is a heavy dose of CMC. Again, I know he's very expensive, but for me, he's got to be in cash lineups, partly because I can't totally trust every single guy in the running back position. Like, there is a lot of intriguing plays, and I'm going to give you a few other names, but the only guy I trust in this entire slate that I know for a fact, like he's going to score 15+ points, is CMC. And we all know what he can do when he gets it going. I love that you brought up the Baltimore guys, because last night what me and Joe did on our show was rank the top 5 running backs with their price. So obviously you're bringing an account for that. And for me, it was Gus Edwards 2, Justice Hill 3. And we disagree about the Texans game. I actually think the Ravens are going to be up. I don't know if they're going to cover, because 9 is a big number. And CJ Stroud is such a good quarterback. They're going to play to the very end. But I just have a feeling Baltimore is going to be up a majority of this game, and there's going to be a lot of rushing attempts. Now, full discretion, we need to keep checking the news on Dalvin Cook. Like, it pisses me off because I would be all over both of these guys if Harbaugh wouldn't have came out and said that we think he has the chance to be a very important piece during the playoffs, whatever the fuck that means. But if you look at it, since Keaton Mitchell's been out, and it's been a short period, it's given a boost for both of these guys. I mean, Edwards saw the second most carries in a game this entire season versus Miami, which was his first week without Mitchell. And that was a game, remember, the Dolphins were up huge. He even saw 10 carries in a meaningless Week 18 game without Lamar and the guys that he only played the first half. And what I love about Edwards is despite being 42nd in snap share, 37th in opportunity share, and 24th in carries, he's 4th in the league in rushing touchdowns at 13th. That's, pretty impressive. And the even bigger thing is most goal line carries of any running back in the NFL at 15. If they get the ball on the 1 yard line, that Gus Edwards vulture touchdown is coming. And then, oh, by the way, he's on a team that runs it the most in the NFL by a significant margin at over 31 carries per game, and they've lost Keaton Mitchell. It's the exact same thing for Justice Hill. Did I mention that the Ravens rush it 31 times a game in a game that I think they're going to be up? Hill scored 8.7 points in that game that I mentioned, the first one where, that was the game actually Mitchell went out and got injured, I think, early in the third quarter. He followed that up in his only full game with the starters and Mitchell out by having his biggest game of the year, scoring 22.2 points. And this was kind of a theme because on DK, Mitchell started getting significant work week 9. Before that, Hill scored 8.3 points or more in 4 of the first 7 games, with 2 games of 12.9 points or more. Obviously, he's had a game of 12.9 points or more since the Mitchell injury, and he's not playing. And I don't think Cook's going to be a factor this week. It does worry me going forward. It worries me even a little this weekend, but I think Justice Hill is one of the best values in the slate at 4,800 because, again, the running backs are basically 5,700 and above that you want on DK. And then there's Justice Hill at 4,800, who I think could end up having a good game, especially, he's involved in the passing game as well. The other guys I just want to mention real quick, both come from the KC Buffalo game. Pacheco, who at 6,400, I don't think he's going to be in a lot of my cash lineups because I think Buffalo is going to win. But if you're somebody that thinks the Chiefs are going to win this game, I think Pacheco should absolutely be in your cash lineups on DraftKings because I think the easiest way for the Chiefs to win the first road game for Patrick Mahomes and his crew, which is just ridiculous in the playoffs, is for a steady dose of Isaiah Pacheco. He's got double figures in 6 straight, averaging 20 points per game on DK in that span. And what I love is his volume and the run and the passing game has been significant. 15-plus attempts in 6 of his last 7. Had 42 rush attempts in his last 2, including obviously 24 in the first wildcard game. Another game, Chiefs were up and, it was kind of out of hand pretty early in the fourth quarter. And the big thing is since McKinnon's gone on IR for DraftKings, because, again, we get points per reception, 5 games, he's had 21 targets, 20 receptions. When you add up the yards, that's an extra 2 points per game, which those points matter when you get down to these smaller slates. And then on the other side, James Cook is the other guy that I do want to mention. To the same kind of nature. I think that you've seen the Chiefs, you can run on them. They're a very good pass defense. They have at times struggled against the run. But for me in cash, it's probably going to be CMC and Justice Hill, honestly, in most lineups because I'm going to spend a lot on CMC. I already told you I like Baker, and I'm going to play Evans with him. There's going to be a couple other expensive guys I want to include into my lineup. So you're going to have to take some shots, take some of the bottom of the barrel players that Chris does such a great job of giving you each week. And for me at the running back position, it's definitely Justice Hill this week.
Yeah, Justice Hill's amazing. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it was like week 17. It was an easy pick for, Justice Hill in week 17. We knew, that the week before. No, it was week 7.
Yeah, you're right. Mitchell was out week 16. He played week 17. That was when he had the monster game.
Yeah, he caught a touchdown. It was just, it was amazing. And again, it is I sent a tweet about it, and lately all I've really tweeted is my stuff, or I'll share something, through Six Pack or something like that. So stuff doesn't, my thoughts. You tweet if I say hi, everybody, say hi or something back. I get like one or two interactions. You know what I mean? It just
I do.
With the way life is, I sitting on my phone when I get home, sure. But when you look at the running backs here, it's all about as I alluded to, the Baltimore Ravens running backs who did a great job laying it out there. James Cook is also going to be a factor against this Kansas City defense. And when you look at, James Cook, 6'8" on FanDuel, as you said, 6'3" on DraftKings, only $24 on Yahoo. I have James Cook, 14, 15 carries, 65 to 70 yards, 3, maybe 4 receptions. I think that's not even overly ambitious, looking at how this game could play out, 24-21. I think we're looking at a low scoring game. I don't think we're going to get that triple double overtime kind of game where it goes back and forth. But
Chiefs also one of the best teams in the league at defending number 1 wide receivers, which means if Stephon Diggs isn't catching passes, I think that's very good for James Cook, because obviously other guys are going to have to get involved in the passing game.
And Gabe Davis is probably more
He's
than
out.
likely.
They just ruled him out. So, yep.
He's been dealing with like his what was it, a strained or a PCL ligament in his knee. And you mentioned Khalil Shaker, bottom of the barrel special. He's been in the article for the last few weeks, all season, I should say, but really heavy the last few weeks, given how Josh Allen is finally they've turned things around in Buffalo. Look where they are now. And as we go down the list, I love the idea of everybody's going to flock to Zay Flowers, and rightfully so, given his price tag and given what we expect. What about, old and trusty Odell Beckham Jr.? I went, if you want to read, what I had to say in length, literally word for word, you can go to the at Fantasy Six Pack and read bottom of the barrel. But basically I said, early on his career, he was a polarizing player. After he made that one-handed catch, he was a cultural phenomenon. Let's just call it what it is. Kids are still, looking at him. Even adult men are looking at what is his hairstyle, that curly kind of Justin Timberlake permish kind of hair.
He's really a baller too. Like, he caught a touchdown in the Super Bowl and he only played half a game for the Rams. Yeah. Like, dude can still ball.
Yeah, but people put him down and made fun of him because he seemed like some sort of, what everybody loves to go to on social media. He was a thug. He's a bad guy. He's a piece of crap. He was never that way. But instead of looking at him as a cultural phenomenon for, dancing and dyeing his hair and his clothes, what about what he's doing? He's cool and calm now. He's a father now. He's a great dude. He's never been a jerk, never been arrested. No, I mean, it doesn't, I've been arrested before. Look what became of that. But when you're in the eye of the public and you're a good professional football player, everything's one-sided, right? And so again, Odell Beckham Jr. against Houston could be a good move. He's only 5-6 on FanDuel, 4-6 on DK, $14 on Yahoo. 4 and 14 is my lucky number. I have Odell 5 to 6 targets, 4 to 5 receptions, 55 to 60 yards. So if Houston is on defense, right, and they're going to just run with, Lamar Jackson has, leveled up big time, right? He's probably more than likely going to win a second MVP. He's just been unbelievable.
Houston, by the way, has allowed several running QBs. Kyler Murray had 50 yards and a touchdown. Lamar rushed for 35 yards earlier this year. Like that some of the best running QBs have had big days versus them.
Yeah, and that changes the way you play on defense completely, right? If you look at what Tampa Bay knows, Jared Goff won't run at all, right? So that at least frees up one guy, a spy or a middle linebacker, however you want to do it. So to me, when you look at this the Baltimore game, David Goliath, however you want to put it, Odell Beckham is going to be I wouldn't say heavily involved, but he's going to be around. Yeah, the playoffs are his playground. That's where he gets it done. And I wouldn't say he jumped ship in LA, but he won a Super Bowl and now he's on another contending team. It would be great. Everybody this time last week, I don't know, maybe it was just in my corner of the world, just, the people that I follow, everybody was saying this is going to be a Jameson Williams breakout game. He's going to score 2 touchdowns, 80 to 100 yards. It didn't happen. He was only targeted twice, I believe, caught 2 passes for 20 something yards here. I'm not saying he's going to have a breakout game, but again, if you want to keep winning in the playoffs and move on and move on. You can't do the same thing you did last week. And although, Tampa Bay won, the Lions won, so you would think, well, stick to the game plan. You got to have a different wrinkle in there. You got to have a different set of plays to move this thing along here.
Again, because we got the top defense. Again, 6 of the 8 teams were top 12 in DVOA adjusted for their schedule. Yep. Real quickly before we got run backs, because you are the guy that knows these bottom of the barrels. I wanted to show this up because, Mo, I didn't realize this until today, that they actually cut Fournette from the roster.
Ty Johnson all day.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is it Ty? Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. Is it Ty Johnson or Murray you'd rather have as the backup?
I mentioned all of them when I got to, Ty Johnson's portion of the article. When we're talking about running backs here. You had Ty Johnson, you got Leonard Fournette, and you got Latavius Murray. Playoff Lenny and Latavius Murray can both be battering rams, but that's about it.
Fournette's done. They cut Fournette, so now it's just Murray and Johnson. Yeah,
and Murray's a big dude too, and he's a battering ram, and he's got little. I compared him to a wrecking ball and a little bit of a like ballerina in a good way, right? Right. Barry Sanders took ballerina and dance lessons to help him, on the field. So it's not strange. It's not crazy, but Ty Johnson is younger. He's shiftier. He can move around a lot better. There's almost no tread on the tires. And when you look at Ty Johnson, 4.8 on FanDuel, 4.2 on DK, nothing crazy. 4 to 5 carries, 15 to 20 yards, a reception or two for maybe 5 or 10 yards. And again, one reception, he could be gone, not to the house per se, but 20, 30 yards. So you're looking at one catch could be 3, maybe 4 points, something like that. When we get back to the receivers, it's the bottom of the barrel here. I didn't want to use that phrase for the 150th time today, but
marketing.
It's like Trey Palmer in Tampa Bay is going to be a thorn in the side of the Lions, right? God, they might sell out to stop, Rachaad White, who's in my book, a stud running back, who is also very good at catching passes. Godwin, Mike Evans, these guys are going to be, it's going to be frustrating. I'm already going to sit down and be aware of that. I told myself last week, Kupp and Puka. It was Puka that burned us, but that's okay. Trey Palmer.
Shut down Kupp, though, which was really impressive.
Exactly. But this Tampa Bay team just has just loads of offensive talent that Baker could go any which way. And when you look at Trey Palmer, 5.2 on the price discrepancy for Trey Palmer is large, in comparison to some we see it every once in a while. But Trey Palmer, 5.2 on FanDuel, only 3.5 on DK. And to me, I have Trey Palmer 5 to 6 targets. You guys, anybody wants to write this down, you can, or I could show you my notes and you can call me out if it's crazy. But I have Trey Palmer 5 to 6 targets, 3-4 receptions, 30 to 35 yards. And I said, Odell Beckham, I love what Rashad Bateman is kind of coming into, and what a great time for this kid to come into his own. We know when he came into the NFL, there was a lot of high praise for him, and he's just been just soft tissue injuries, all this nonsense. And finally we saw him, kind of finding himself later in the season, and boom, we're rolling into the playoffs. So Rashad Bateman is not at all done. I have Bateman 6 to 7 targets, 4 to 5 receptions, 40 to 45 yards. So right as it stands now, you could go Shaker, Beckham, Palmer, Bateman, and that's a ton of wiggle room for both running back spots and your flex spot. If you had those 3-4 guys, and I got a doozy here at the end, you could fit in, right? You could fit in Christian McCaffrey, Rachaad White, Aaron Jones, any 3 wide receivers you wanted to. You could use them in unison. I'm not saying fade the wide receiver position, but it's a calculated risk. And lastly, in Green Bay, Bo Melton, of all people, he just keeps popping up in everything that I do. And Bo Melton, 4.6 on FanDuel, 3.3 on DK, only $11 on Yahoo. And come to find out, as I was finishing my notes to be, bottom of the barrel WordPress, however it is, I noticed that I mentioned literally all 4 Green Bay Packers wide receivers. I have Dontavian Wicks highlighted, who we could mention right now. I have Wicks to score a touchdown. Jalen Reed.
I was smiling because I mentioned every Green Bay receiver last week, except for the guy that went freaking off Romeo Dobbs. So that was a little bit of a whiff.
Dontavian Wicks to score a touchdown, as I said. Jaden Reed.
Second most snaps of any Green Bay Packers wide receiver last week, which I think is really significant.
Absolutely. Jaden Reed, the rookie from Michigan State, East Lansing, about an hour from me. Romeo Dobbs, is he going to have if I remember correctly, Dobbs, I don't 150 something. All I know is that he averaged 25.2 yards a reception.
It's like
Probably
6
not.
for 1. I think it was 6 for 150. I think you're exactly
Probably
right.
not going to be repeated this week against San Francisco, but doesn't mean we can kick him to the curb. And as I said, Bo Melton. So again, if I have 4 Green Bay wide receivers mentioned, you're going to want to stick, Jordan Love in there and mix and match. On FanDuel, at least you can have 4 players from the same team, and that is it. So when we look at the wide receivers, that's it for me. As I said, Bo Melton, Rashad Bateman, Trey Palmer, Khalil Shaker, we're in agreement there, and Odell Beckham Jr. And just in passing, Justin Watson, just in case one of these games, right? He's going to not go off, let's say, but 80 yards and a touchdown as well within the realm of possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that's what he'll do this week, but the salary relief is there in a game with one of the better quarterbacks of my era, my lifetime.
I mean, we can go ahead and say it. He's one of the best all time.
Yeah, I agree. So when we look at the, I feel like we've skipped a position, but we're 35
Well,
minutes.
I want to do the cash game receivers real quick, if you don't mind. Just,
yeah, absolutely.
I've got 5 guys. So again, we know that I said I got Baker and CMC, and I promise you, there's 3 guys that you got to choose from. To me, you can only take 2 of them. I spent way too much time trying to figure out a way to get Baker, CMC, Nico Evans, and Amon-Ra in the same lineup. It's literally impossible on DK, but Evans is obviously at the top of my list.
I'm going to try that right now as you're talking.
I would love it if you could figure it out.
I'm going to try it on FanDuel at least, and then I'll work my way back.
You make my day. Evans is top just because, again, I'm going with Baker. I kind of like that he had the bad game last week. I think maybe that makes his ownership a little bit lower this week. Remember, though, he had 2 drops that basically would have equated to another 60 yards and a touchdown. If you'd have caught both those passes, which Evans is not a guy who historically drops a lot of passes. He goes over 100 yards. He has a touchdown. He has a big game. He saw 10 targets in their first meeting versus the Lions. Again, did not have a very good game, but he had 10 targets. I do also want to say, because we didn't bring this up when we were talking golf, Goff torched the Bucs in the first matchup, 352 yards, 2 touchdowns, one of his biggest games on DraftKings. But Amon-Ra, to me, I think he is going to be the other lock for me, and I'm going to end up going Amon-Ra, Evans, and then obviously CMC. I said it last week that he needs to be in your lineup because he is just Mr. Consistency and is so freaking good indoors at home. Home games this season, and this was coming into last week, averaging 22.18 points on DK, scored at least 18.2 in every single home game. 9.62 targets per, at least 7 targets in every single home game. 7.125 receptions per, at least 6 in every single home game. Averaging over 100 yards receiving, 101.5, at least 70 plus in every single home game. Got the 4 touchdowns. And then he went out last week and caught 7 passes for 110 yards and scored 21 points. So it's just pretty much automatic. That is his floor. He's going to have at least 5-6 receptions. He's going to have around 70 to 100 yards. And you need those guys. Like if you're going to spend on somebody, especially in the playoffs with these smaller slates, I think it's almost equally important that they're just not going to have a horrible game than it is that they're going to necessarily go off. The other guy, Nico Collins, I got to admit, I kept wanting to go away from him. I kept wanting to go away from 7,100. And then it's the Marlon Humphrey being out has just made me at least go, I got to consider this no matter what, because it's kind of similar to what we saw last week, right? Where the Browns top corner got, banged up in practice and he went out, had a great game. But the big thing is they don't really have any other receiving options. Like, obviously, if you're looking for darts, guys like your bottom of the barrel, you got Hutchinson, you got Mechie, you got these guys, but none of them have been consistent. In the 6 games for Collins without Dell, 43 targets. That includes the game against the Jets where he had 1 target. 36 receptions. That includes the Jets game where he had 1 reception, averaging just under 100 yards per. 21.4 points per game on DK in that span. Again, he scored like 3 points versus the Jets in that game. He's had 2 games of 37 plus points, 3 of 22 plus points. You do have to consider, because last week, 7 targets, 96 yards, a touchdown versus another very good defense. Obviously, with all these expensive guys, because I'm going to go, like I keep saying, it's going to have Baker, going to have Evans, going to have CMC. It's going to either be Collins or it's going to be Amon-Ra. So the 2 cheaper guys that I'm looking at, Khalil Shakir, 3,800. Gabe Davis being out is huge. He's going to be the number 2 receiver. The Chiefs are an unbelievable defense versus wide receivers. But what is kind of crazy, they are top 5 against number 1 receivers. They are top 5 versus number 3 wide receivers. They are 24th versus number 2 wide receivers. They actually give up more yardage per game to number 2 wide receivers than they do number 1. That has so much to do with Snell. It's just an unbelievable lockdown corner. That's a very good opportunity for Khalil Shakir, who is absolutely the number 2 wide receiver in this offense. I know Dalton Kincaid probably the number 2 target, but he's going to be the number 2 receiver lining up in that position. And in the 2 games without Davis, 9 targets, 9 receptions, 136 yards, a touchdown, 31.6 points on DK, at least 12.1 for what we're looking for in cash, which Dave Eddy, again, one of the things he's taught from, you're looking for 3 times and you're golden. 12.1 will get you 3 times at 3,800. The other guy is your boy Josh Reynolds at 3,700, who, again, if Raymond is out, which it looks like he is going to be, he's going to probably be in almost all my cash lineups. He was one of my favorite plays last week at 4,300, rewarded me, hit 3 times his number, scored 13 points. And it's basically the same formula this week. I think this is going to be the game that the most points are scored in. And the Lions, I know you mentioned Williams, who I keep waiting for the monster game because it's coming. And it might be this week. Maybe it'll even be in the conference title game or Super Bowl. But Reynolds has been the guy that's been way more consistent, especially from a DFS perspective. The Bucs do not cover wide receivers well. They're 24th on DK. And Raymond was injured early in the Vikings game. That was week 18. And since that injury, Reynolds, 7 targets, 5 receptions in both games. And on the season, Reynolds has 5 double-digit games on DK with 3 extra ones of 9 points or more. So now you're talking about 8 of his 18 games. You know, he scored 9 points or more at 3,700. We're only looking for 10 to 12 points to be a hit. If he scores 7 to 9, you're golden. And what I really like is Reynolds is a burner, man. Like at any point, he can, take a 30, 40-yard touchdown. I do also just like the way that Goff plays at home. Again, he's so much better. So those are the 5 receivers basically that I'm looking at. You got to pick one of those 2 cheap guys. If you're going like me with the expensive guys, you're going to have to pick 2 of the top 3 receivers because you can't get them all, at least on DK. But I completely agree with you on Wicks. He's another guy that I love. I like OBJ. Like there's a lot of guys, but if you're going to spend up like I am for cash on those receivers, it's going to basically have to be guys 4K or below 4K is going to have at least one in your lineup, and then also your flex.
Well, I did it while you were chatting at least on FanDuel, and then Mr. Mo Green said he built one with Baker, CMC, Evans, St. Brown, Odell, and Brevin Jordan at tight end. Brevin Jordan
is that DK though or FanDuel?
That's what we don't know. I would imagine. Okay. I don't know. I can't even guess. If I did, it's 50-50. So that's cool.
Well, if you don't mind, just answer so we can know because I'm very curious.
Yeah, I got every guy you wanted in, and I really punted on literally 3 spots. Baker, CMC, Kyle Juszczyk of all things, but again, mentioned in bottom of the barrel. This guy every once in a while he'll have 2 carries for 2 touchdowns and 2 yards, just 2 across the board.
Shanahan likes to stick it to LaFleur. What's sticking it more than your fullback having a touchdown?
And your fullback, I mean, and Juszczyk is phenomenal. His wife is even better. If you saw all those custom. Swift had that custom jacket that was a Kelsey jersey, but she turned it into a jacket. She did the same thing for that Taylor Lautner kid who was the werewolf in Twilight, I think.
And they're selling like crazy.
I know, it's awesome. And so again, Baker, CMC, Juszczyk, Evans, Nico, Amon-Ra. I put Noah Gray in as my tight end for Kansas City again. 2 to 3 receptions for 25 to 30 yards. That's really all we need given his price tag. And then in the flex spot, your boy Dalvin Cook. We'll see what this guy's got in the tank. And if you look across the board, everybody's using the secret weapon in I just did it in air quotes, but across the board. And then this one stinks, but hey, you want to finish it off. You have no money left over. The Green Bay Packers DST. Again, don't care what points for, points against. We're looking for sacks, interceptions, things
we
that
saw
go
what
along
happened with
those
the Texans
lines.
Last week, who Joe Matz was on it. I'll give them that. But they had 2 defensive touchdowns. You never know. Like you don't. Defense is so random.
Exactly. By what? By like their second year linebacker, Christian
Right.
Christian
Yeah.
Harris or something along those. I drafted him in an IDP league. I've been sitting on him ever since. So that's what it
God
is.
bless you
And
for doing an IDP
I
league.
entered it for $1 and we'll see what happens. When we look at the tight end position, realistically, it's, unfortunately, before I get into, I should say, unfortunately, everybody was excited, myself included, Mark Andrews, doing us a couple things on the sidelines. But I believe an hour or two ago, Baltimore came out and said they
He's
did not
doubtful. It doesn't.
activate him.
Yeah.
They didn't activate him, so
Oh,
he's
they didn't
he
activate.
cannot.
Okay.
No. So more than likely, if they move on to Championship Sunday, that would be a better spot. And if I was, Houston, you got to look at those little nuggets. I mean, they that's how lowly they think of Houston, where they're like, we don't need our best tight end, one of the best tight end in all of football. We're gonna let him rest one more week because we don't really need him to beat you.
I mean, Likely's been pretty good in the Ravens defense. So,
without a doubt. And he is, aside from Dalton Schultz, Isaiah Likely is probably my favorite tight end of this week. I have him to score a touchdown without a doubt. You're looking at 5 to 6 targets, 3 to 4 receptions, 45 to 50 yards. Right now, Houston 29th against opposing tight ends. If this game is going to be all the bells and whistles and fireworks that you think it is, Likely's going to be in on the action. And before you say, well, Chris, you mentioned, Odell Beckham and Rashad Bateman, you like both Baltimore running backs. Well, yeah, when you have Lamar Jackson, this guy can support 5 or 6 players, and I don't even think it's that to talk that out of school about it. So to me,
don't forget too, the Texans are awful versus tight ends. Over 9 targets per, over 6.5 receptions. Just last week, I know we think about Njoku, 7 for 93. Combined, they had 11 for 150 yards on 17 targets. So teams definitely attack the Texans at the tight end position.
Yeah, and Likely, he's one of those. He's transformed into one of those hybrids. Dave always mentions it in comparison to what's that kid's name?
My boy who doesn't do anything, Cal Pitts.
No, that kid in Arizona. I forget what his name is. McBride. Yeah, Isaiah Likely is almost the same. He's tall. He's he's elusive. He's sneaky, but he always finds space, and that's all we need. Dalton Schultz, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him. Last, if you look back at the box score, Dalton Schultz was only targeted twice, if I remember correctly. And you say, well, that
Still
was
had
because
a big game.
Yeah, they didn't, given what happened for, the Houston Texans on defense, they scored twice. So in a weird way, Houston, not even weird, Houston was like, you know what? We're just going to, sit back, give the ball to Singletary, Damon Pierce if we need to, and go from there. So don't fool yourself. Dalton Schultz is a very integral part to this Houston Texans team and offense. I have him 5 to 6 targets, 3 to 4 receptions, and around 40 to 45 yards. I like, lastly, I'll leave it at that because, I got Kate Otten, Luke Musgrave, Brevin Jordan, Dawson Knox. I could talk about, but I like Luke Musgrave. Finally, he's back, and Tyler Kraft was playing so well, and it all started Thanksgiving when Dave mentioned him when we were talking about the Lions, and Tucker Kraft hasn't looked back since. And so when Tyler Kraft was on the field last week and catching passes, I said, Luke Musgrave is back. I wonder if he'll get his tight end 1 spot back, and come to find out they're splitting, tight end 1 duties. And the Packers are along the same lines as New England when they play. They love that I formation, that double tight end set inside the red zone. You're looking at high up
25 plays last week with both of them on the field at the same time, to your point.
Exactly. And again, when they're on the field together, when they're on the field together, more than likely they're in the red zone and anything can happen, especially the way Jordan Love has been playing. So give me Schultz, Likely, and Luke Musgrave, and a little bit of Dawson Knox, who you said you liked the combination of Allen and Khalil Shaker and Kincaid. You could make a case. You could make a duplicate lineup where you just move out Kincaid and put Knox in there. And
save
I don't
some money too.
Exactly. And that's where I'm going from there, Keith. So what are you looking at for the tight ends this week?
So again, there's actually 5 guys that I really like for cash. I kind of ranked them though. The price is going to be dependent because Kate Otten probably will be in a majority of my lineups because again, I'm playing Baker. You play Evans and then put Otten as a double stack. He's just, he's the cheapest starting tight end available, like clear starting tight end. He caught 8 passes for 89 yards last week. Recently, the Lions have given up receptions to tight end, 5+ receptions in 5 of their last 7. And what I love about Otton is, unlike a lot of these other teams where there's multiple tight ends that could play or will play, Otton is on the field all the time. He's always running routes. Anytime the Bucs run 2 tight ends out there, he's still running a route on passing play. Usually the other one is in just a pass block. Dalton Kincaid, 4,800. You're basically getting the second target in the Buffalo offense, at 4,800. The last 3 weeks, it's nuts. He only has 4 less receptions, 3 less targets, actually has more yards and points on DraftKings than Stephon Diggs. And again, the Chiefs, one of the best defenses in the league, defending number 1 wide receivers, meaning, whether it's Shakir, whether it's Knox, Kincaid, Cook. I do think that they're going to have to, in the passing game, look other places than Diggs, because obviously they're going to put Snead on him a majority of the game. Likely, we just talked about, love him now that I know Andrews is out. Last 5, 22 targets, 17 receptions, 5 touchdowns, over 15 points per game. And again, the Texans just over 9 targets, 6.5 receptions. That's been consistent all season. Luke Musgrave, you mentioned, I also really like him. He scored 7 or more points in 7 to 12 games, 8.4 or more in 3 of his last 5, with 14 plus in 2 of them. One of the best, big play tight ends I've seen in a while. We saw it last week. I know he's wide open, but that dude is a real speedster. We were at the Senior Bowl last year. He was clocked over 20 miles an hour on a play. He's a tight end. He's like 240 pounds. But if you can find the money, the guy for me is George Kittle, 5,200. He's had 5 games this year on DK of 22 plus points. And typically with San Francisco, it's been difficult this season because they got that 3-headed monster in the passing game, right? Like, it's Debo, it's Ayuk, it's Kittle. Who do you play? We have this year, me and Joe Matt's basically gone, if it's a team that plays heavy zone, it's Debo, because he's a lot better in yards per route run. If it's heavy man, that's Brandon Ayuk. Well, the Green Bay Packers are 17th in both. So I'm looking at, if they're 17th in both, give me George Kittle, especially when these Packers really have been struggling versus tight ends. Obviously, we all know that Jake Ferguson had 10 catches for 93 yards and 3 touchdowns. To me, what's more scary is in their last 4 games, Johnny Munt and Josh Oliver, not 2 household names, they combined for 6 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. And I literally can't even name the Panthers tight ends, and I looked this stat up. They combined for 7 receptions for 80 yards on this team. And over their last 4 games, teams are targeting tight ends on 25.6% of their passing plays. If that ends up being the case with George Kittle, who is really the only tight end that sees targets in this offense, he could end up having a monster game. I think that we know Shanahan likes to script those first 10, 20 plays. Would not be surprised at all if it's scripted great plays where Kittle gets one-on-one, and we all know he's got both the speed and size to be a really difficult matchup. So the difficult, though, with Kittle and cash games is just finding out, how can you get him into your lineup? You're going to have to go really cheap at 2 positions. If you do that and defense, you're pretty much saying, I got to play Tampa Bay at 2,500, but it is possible.
And that's okay. That's how, if that's how it's supposed to be, then that's how it shall be. Well, I'm going to say maybe 2 sentences. I should say that. I'm going to say more than that, but it's going to be quick when we look at the DSTs. There are 8 teams left, in the playoffs, and we're going heavy, wide receivers and putting in cheaply priced running backs, or you go vice versa, have, 2 stud running backs and even use another stud at flex while you go as cheap as it gets at wide receiver. So when we look at the DST portion of this weekend's games, of course, Baltimore stands out. They have been unbelievable to end the season. And when you look at everybody else, it's nothing crazy. What I'm going to do, and I made 1 lineup so far, and I've entered it in, probably a couple hundred contests, something along those lines. And again, I'll edit it when I go back. But if I'm going to start making numerous entries for, single entry GPPs, I'll put a different line in each one. DST is going to be the last position I fill. And it just, if I have, let's say on FanDuel, I have exactly $3,800 left. Well, then I will use Kansas City because they are $3,800. If I only have $3,400 left, I can only have the Texans or Green Bay. So it's up to you. I would not focus all my efforts on team defense in this round or how we're going to do that. It just makes no sense. I'm going to load up everywhere else, and whatever I have left, that's what I'm going to live with at the DST position. And when I look at, and I'll tell you, Keith, and anybody else out there that's listening, I have all my final scores predicted for all 4 games. I have no team to score 20 or less points. Every game this week is at least 20 or more points scored by each team. Again, it doesn't matter how many points a team scores for a DST to accumulate points. But again, if there's going to be touchdowns and field goals, that means an offense is going to be on the field a little bit longer. Ball, time of possession, we go from there. That's a weird road we can go down for DST. I do it in my head almost every time I lay in bed at night. It's not fun, so I got it all out to you, and we will go from there. Keith, anything, earth-shattering to say about DSTs for the divisional round of the playoffs?
Just that, kind of to further your point, in cash, I'm going to start basically at the Buffalo Bills at 2,800, and you pick one of those 4 defenses. I mean, to me, obviously the Ravens and the Niners, they're the best 2 defenses, but they're so much more expensive. I mean, you're talking about $600 and $700 when at the end of the day, we can't really predict what a defense is going to end up doing because, again, outside of Joe Matz, who he was all over the Texans last week. You can't predict turnovers. You can't predict touchdowns. I mean, special team touchdowns can screw you. So I'm just looking at the cheap ones. I'm going to go, like I said, the Buffalo Bills and the Chiefs. To me, they're the 2 most appealing because I think that's going to be the game that it's going to be the most difficult to kind of move the ball. Those are 2 really good defenses. Chiefs have obviously struggled, not being quite the offense they have. Josh Allen is somebody who, as great as he is, he's going to turn the ball over. And the Packers, I don't really like because, again, I just think the 49ers offense is going to roll. Tampa, I don't love either, but they at least blitz a lot, which, that has sometimes historically given golf problems. They also have been getting some sacks as of late. So you could potentially get a turnover, when they get pressure or get sacks. But overall, really the Bills Chiefs, if I can do it, it's one of those teams, and just basically pick the team that you think is going to win the game.
And that's it. Earth-shattering advice at the DST position from Keith. Before we split, anybody out there, you want a little bit more action, you want to get in a little bit more on the action, you don't want the conversation to end, head over to the Fantasy Six-Pack Discord where everybody's talking DST literally 24/7. The NHL is rolling when it comes to betting and DFS, NBA. DFS is unbelievably popular. I would consider, obviously, football is probably the most popular. And then I think just going out on a limb and saying NBA DFS is not a close second, but they're second. And we will go from there. So, Keith, before we split, thanks for joining me and anybody else out there. I'll be around. I'm going to share my divisional round bottom of the barrel notes, which is out right now. You can catch that at Fantasy Six Pack or head over to Keith's page. He's always catching a broadcast somewhere. He's always talking into a microphone with a camera. It's lovely to see.
I love to talk. Oh, will you do me one favor for my Twitter page? I need you, just without thinking, pick a number 1 through 2,000. Just a number, random as can be.
14. That's as I told you, it's either 4 or 14, and 14 for some odd reason has brought me more luck than 4. So
you made somebody very happy because I'm giving away some stuff. I appreciate, I try to every 100 followers give away stuff. So that'll be one of the 2 numbers to one of the winners. So I got to go figure out who that was.
You got it. Well, thanks for being with me here, Keith.
Man, and always enjoy
we will talk to everybody shortly. Be safe, be wise, and please always gamble responsibly. Talk to you soon. Bye.